Keys mobile, keys mobile.
Welcome to Keys Mobile, where the friend begins. News and stories for families and friends. We're here for the community to sharing loves, spreading joy and learning with you. Keys Mobile, let's connect and grow with food. Fun and news, there's so much to know. Keys Mobile, with the time to shine together. We build a future that's fine from tasty treats to justice, treats to justice we seek. Building bridges every day of the week. With Keys Sean's light, we carry the flame. Empowering voices, we're making a name. Keys Mobile, it's our time to shine together. We build a future too, that's kind. So hit the play, enjoy the Keys Mobile crew, making waves, bringing change all for you. Keys Mobile.
Keys mobile. Keys mobile. Keys mobile. Keys mobile.
Keys Mobile. We build a future that's fine from tasty treats.
Back in November, that they didn't move from that. Would have been 12 years old, specifically penis to anal opening. With respect to the criminal sexual, child sexually abusive activity, that would be based on the text messages as well as the minor's testimony as well. Combining those two things satisfies the elements of those charges. However, going to count one in murder in the first degree premeditated, I would like to go through and put some of the pieces together. And we are standing here today in court on January 9th, 2025. Ziyah was seen, last time that she was seen was on January 9th, 2024 at 2:56, getting off of the bus at 3 Mile Drive and down river. She towards her.
Stop letting them increase. I used to raise my car every year until I found this huge loophole that insurance.
We take that moment in time and then go to Cordell Wright's testimony, where he testified that they picked Ziyah up on their way back to their shop at 9000 Connor, and they proceeded with her to that location. We have Jarvis Butts' sister's testimony, Tijuana Butts, who did say she saw a young girl with a very descriptive and distinct jacket getting in and out of that car, the white Cadillac Escalade. We have Sergeant O'Rourke's testimony as to his cell phone locations based on cell tower information and the historical call detail records, which place them consistent going out to Ypsilanti. And then we have Cordell also testified to seeing Ziyah in Ypsilanti with Cordell and Jarvis. His house based on his tether hours by 9 p.m. And that is the last time that anyone who is not Jarvis Butts would see Ziyah Harris alive. From the shop, we proceed out to the Parkcrest Inn, where Jarvis Butts checked into a hotel at 9:30 p.m. and Sergeant O'Rourke's testimony corroborates this, placing his phone in the area of that 20,000 Harper address at around midnight till early in the next morning on the 10th, using the data that you see on the screen in those times. Recapping January 9th, this is the last time that we have any sort of communication from Ziyah. There was, if you look at those messages that Sergeant Jones went through and read, just between Ziyah and Jarvis, there was consistent and constant communication up until January 9th. There's also no messages from Jarvis after Ziyah goes missing on the 9th, looking for her, seeing where she is, trying to find her, trying to help, as anyone should do at that time, her family locate her. There's no messages to her phone, to that Text Now account from Jarvis Butts' phone. Her legal guardian and grandmother, Annette Harris, has not seen any social media posts. The OIC of the case, Sergeant Jones, has not seen anything for a total of 1 year now. The Lieutenant George Harris, who was involved in the investigation in the first month, didn't see anything that he saw from social media or Text Now after the 9th. Jarvis Butts on the 9th, we know, borrowed Latricia Johnson's car overnight, which was unusual. He borrowed that from, and then again borrowed it on the 10th or 11th. We know that Ziyah's glasses were found in that car sometime after the 10th or 11th when Latricia Johnson was at that shop, and Jarvis Butts snatches them out of her hand.
Let me show you why I stopped paying for all my other sample libraries. This is
from the Park Crest Inn, and from January 9th, we go out to 7 Mile and Burke. This is by far the most important location in this case, because we know that the defendant spent from 11:40 p.m. on the 10th to 1:34 a.m., nearly 2 hours in that area, in that wooded area where the Rouge River runs through. And to give, this is from the slideshow of the scene photos that were taken at 7 Mile and Burke. This is the area where it's the people's theory Jarvis Butts did at least one of two things. Either killed Ziyah at 7 Mile and Burke, but at the very least dumped her body in this location. We know this because of the evidence that was found there, specifically the black hoodie, which you see in this photo here, as well as the pink bodysuit and the shoes that we confirmed, or that are hers, based on the picture that the OIC received from her brother. And those items were collected. The black hoodie and pink jumpsuit were tested. And importantly, which the analysis here and hypothesis and results pertains to the shoulder that she did in school on January. Importantly, that in that this shows that Ziyah Harris's DNA is there, as well as Jarvis. And importantly, this is one of the stain swabs that was positive, not just for blood, but human blood, based on the hemotrace results. In the next one, we have, this pertains to not the stain swabs, but the regular swab that Rion Green testified was a wearer ID swab. Importantly here, Jarvis Butts' DNA from that swab that would have been taken around the neck of that sweater, or the end of the arms of that sweater, is there with very strong support, and of course, Ziyah's DNA is there as well. And when we look at that sweater, specifically through the PowerPoint photos that Rion Green took and put together, we can see that there is a lot of markings on this. If the court looks closely on this, and I did, there are on this sweater, this is just the front of them, markings or the damage to the hood, that it is the people's theory would have been stab wounds or something to that effect that happened when Jarvis Butts murdered Ziyah Harris. We also have to look, and it goes to the premeditation element as well as everything he did before, at Jarvis Butts' act, specifically what he did to attempt to conceal or cover up his role in the murder of Ziyah Harris. First, we have the glasses that he made sure he grabbed directly from Latricia Johnson's hands when shown, that are consistent with the glasses she had in the photo from the 9th when she was in that phone of his out of Miss Davis's car and into someone else successful, and then Sergeant Jones testified that they ultimately did recover that phone from Miss Davis's car. There is the phone call to Latricia Johnson, which was played when she was testifying, saying to get anything he touched clean, to clean anything he touched, to get anything, don't drive her car, drive his mom's car, which is important because when you combine her testimony of when Jarvis Butts took her car, those two times on the 9th and 10th, and then either the next day or that same day, it's important because that car is the car that he transported Ziyah Harris out to 7 Mile and Bird to either dump her body or through all of the lies that. But in highlighting those, he denies to Detective Mays that he was with Ziyah at all or had talked to Ziyah at all on the 9th, denies ever picking her up, denies to, even when confronted with the January 9th messages, he said that it wasn't him initially. Obviously, we've heard in the subsequent interviews, specifically on June 1st with OIC, with the OIC, he came off of that. He told Shannon Harris that Ziyah texted him on the 9th. She says that he never did that. And we have some of their messages in the record as well. He denies going to a hotel and denies going to a hotel with Ziyah Harris and denies having any sort of sexual relationship with Ziyah, even though the text now messages completely prove that that is an absolute lie. We also have his motive. We know from Sergeant Jones that he was going to, until roughly December, I believe, is what Sergeant Jones testified to. We know that that date was adjourned because he said it was out in Clinton Township, but I submit to this court that that's not the legal issue he was talking about. He was talking about the legal issue he would have had if Ziyah had been left alive. He had to make sure that when he was in custody, that she was not going to give birth to any child of his. That's his motive in this case. That's why that's January 9th. Sentencing date was adjourned to February 7th, so he could take care of that potential legal issue. He was being told consistently by Ziyah throughout the months that she might be pregnant, and then on 11/27, she says to him that it's hard to do this gym shit with this baby. Less than a week or 2 weeks later, he's searching on Google how to abort a baby, how to not just abort a baby or get an abortion, but how to do it at home. How to get rid of that without, we clearly have that motive. And obviously, Judge, one of the big issues in this case is proving that Ziyah Harris is dead without having a body. On January 9th, she vanished off the face of the earth. There is absolutely no evidence after the 9th that she was alive, that she was sending messages to anyone. Her, again, legal guardian had not seen her since the 9th. No one else, officers, friends, family have seen her since the 9th. There's no social media post reviewed by any officer to this day that would indicate she was alive. There's no messages, no further messages on text now after the 9th. There is a full and complete stop of any activity that would indicate she was alive. And Judge, I submit to this court that if that were the evidence that we show that she's in fact at 7 Mile and Bird, which we just saw a photo of, has Jarvis Butts' DNA on it and Ziyah Harris' DNA on it, and it is covered in blood, indicating that something traumatic happened to her. And all the other evidence shows that something traumatic happened to her at the hands of Jarvis Butts. And then we go back to his motive. Was told by Ziyah that she was pregnant, searched all of the home abortion procedures, which we just passed of 2024. Judge, I submit to this court that the evidence that you have over the last 4 days proves not only that Ziyah Harris is currently deceased, but also that she was murdered by the defendant, who had plenty of motive to do so, had plenty of opportunity to do so, and he did that. The defendant's case does not hit a break because he successfully hid her body. The evidence, probable cause, in which the question is she probably dead, and did the defendant probably do that? Both questions are answered with a yes, based on all of the evidence that you have seen. I would reserve any further argument for rebuttal. Thank you.
Attorney Quick?
Thank you, Judge.
Do you want to see how much money you're eligible for? If you were injured at work within the last 2 years, you could have money coming your way.
I know how well aware, I'm here for 4 days, and we've seen over the last 4 days and determine if there's not premeditated first-degree murder. And if you look critically at what the evidence is and evidence, there is not even by a probable cause standard. To bind over on premeditated first-degree murder, there has to be sufficient facts or evidence to show by a probable cause standard that each of the elements of premeditated murder in the first degree has to be evidence that the defendant caused the death of the deceased, that some action that he made or did caused that person's death, that there was an intent to kill, that the intent to kill was premeditated, and that it was deliberate. And here there is not enough evidence, even by a probable cause standard, that Jarvis Butts caused the death of Ziyah Harris. There's been no testimony of any eyewitness stating that they saw Jarvis Butts doing any act that could have caused Ziyah Harris' death. There's been no testimony of any eyewitness that they saw Jarvis Butts doing anything in preparation of doing something that could have caused her death. There's not probable cause to believe that Mr. Butts had an intent to, no evidence of any threats made by Mr. Butts to Ziyah. There's no evidence of any threats made to a third party that he was going to do something or that he had a problem that he had to take care of. Ms. Davis testified that she was aware of an issue that he had in Clinton Township and that she. There's no testimony that he took any specific action in a deliberation to kill her, or that in killing her. There's Google searches about legal ways to abort a child, not how to kill somebody or dispose of a body related to the Google searches. There's no receipts of purchases or anything like that. And these text messages were 2 weeks after they were, I believe, December 9th and 10th, which was, I believe, 2 weeks or 13 days from 11/27/23, which is the text message about gym class. And then there's this kind of cryptic text message in between that says, "It healed." We don't know what that means. But we don't know what Mr. Butts took that to mean. It doesn't mean that he believed she was pregnant. There's no evidence, medical records, to indicate a pregnancy, that she had been to the doctor in September. When she originally texted or messages Mr. Butts and that she thinks that she's pregnant, there's no evidence of a pregnancy. She went to the doctor. We heard from her guardian, her grandmother, and her aunt who lived with her. No testimony from either of them that they suspected she was pregnant. that there was any medical issues that she was pregnant. Insinuation that she's wearing baggy clothing. She was wearing denim pants on the day that she disappeared, and there was no testimony that those were not pants that she had recently bought because she didn't fit into the clothing that she previously had. There's no evidence of any kind of plan. There's no messaging between Mr. Butts and Ms. Harris that indicates an escalation of animosity between the two of them. In fact, he essentially kind of starts to disengage. And so there's no written evidence that he had. Our submission would be that he understood at that point that she wasn't pregnant and was.
Your EBT or SNAP card is now covering your daily expenses. All EBT or SNAP card holders
disengaging. Let's talk about what we did see. So we know that Ziyah got on her school bus around 2:45 on the 9th. She got off the bus a few minutes later, and then she was seen walking up Bedford. She was wearing at that point light colored blue jeans, a black hoodie, and then a colorful coat with fur around the hood. There's some insinuation that somehow there was a plan that she would meet up with. We're driving around that afternoon, back and forth to various auto part stores, and I believe that they, in fact, had to go back to one kind of unplanned because they either missed something or there was an issue. Mr. Butts would have known that she would have been on that street at that specific time and that they would have been there at that specific time. Is quite elite. When around back first. We took Ziyah and Mr. Butts' auto shop later that afternoon, and then in Ypsilanti with Mr. Butts and Cordell Wright, and Mr. Wright puts her back at the shop later that evening. But then at 9 p.m., Mr. Butts was actually at 13662 Wilshire, which is his home, where Angel Leonard lives, and where they have kids. So did Ziyah go back with him to that house? And then at 9:30 is when he checks into the Park Crest Motel. Now, we don't know who was with him there, but there is no evidence that Ziyah was ever there. They searched it, they took DNA, they took clippings of various things, they swabbed a shower drain, and there's no evidence that she was ever in that room. We did hear testimony that the Park Crest is a known place where Mr. Butts frequents and takes various lady friends for a rendezvous. It's much more possible and plausible that he took somebody, one of his lady friends there, than somebody who he was going to kill, right? Going to a place he would later, before he was going to kill them, that makes no sense. That is not logical. We heard then that after Mr. Butts left Park Crest Motel, he went to 4 Alexandria, which is Midtown, so kind of across town. And that's where his other girlfriend, Najeen Rushing, lives. So did he take Ziyah with him there to see Miss Rushing? And he stays there for a while, I think, according to Sergeant O'Rourke's mapping. We hear that he is in Melenberg on January the 10th at 4 p.m., over an hour. That's almost 24 hours from when he initially, it's beyond 24 hours from when he initially is with Ziyah, or when he's last with Ziyah. And so it's illogical to think that he was driving around with Ziyah, visiting all of his girlfriends, or if he had done something to her previously, that she was in the car with him while he did that. And in fact, they took a cadaver dog around vehicles, all of his vehicles, every car that he drove, for DNA, for any sign that Ziyah had been in there, and they found nothing. And the call to Ms. Johnson, asking her to wipe down the Sentra that she used that he had borrowed is kind of irrelevant because she testified that she didn't do it. That she did nothing based on what he called to say, and they still didn't, nothing was found. We heard about a pink jumpsuit that was found. We didn't hear any testimony that anybody saw Ziyah wearing this pink jumpsuit. She's not seen wearing it in any video. I don't believe that anybody even identified it as being hers. I don't believe there was any testimony from either Annette Harris or Shannon Harris stating, yes, we recognize that pink jumpsuit, that's something that Ziyah wears. When did she have it? Significant probability that his DNA was on the jumpsuit at all, that he had had any contact with the jumpsuit. And we heard about the black hoodie. And that black hoodie was significantly more weathered than the pink jumpsuit. So we heard about that from the Border Patrol agent Barnes and other folks that came for that. But those appear to be tears in the top of the hood. They don't appear to be stab wounds, and they certainly don't appear to be bullet holes. There's weak support there to the stain and the swabs of the black hoodie. The only support for any DNA on the black hoodie was on the non-stain night that she was in Mr. Butt's Escalade when he and Mr. Wright picked her up after seeing her walking down Harper, that they were in the car driving in up to Lanny. And so the possibility that his DNA got on this non-stained part of the black hoodie is not evidence of premeditated murder in the context of all of the ways that we heard somebody's DNA can. And I kind of talked about this, but we heard testimony that Mr. Butts drove both a Cadillac Escalade and a Nissan Sentra on January 9th and January 10th. There's a lot of pieces of those cars that were tested. Trunk carpet from various areas in both cars. The driver's floor. All of those things were swabbed for blood and nothing was found. We heard about a school ID card that belonged to Ziyah. We heard Valerie Smith testify that she noticed it at some point in February, maybe a month or so after Ziyah was last seen, and that she decided to pick it up 2.5 weeks after she first spotted it. About 2 weeks before, but that she looked at it every single day. Seemingly, if it had been there before then, she would have noticed it. When did it get there? We don't know. There was no evidence, there's no testimony as to that. And there was no other evidence found in the 7 Mile and Greenfield area, and there's no evidence that Mr. Butts was there. We talked a little bit about the medical records, but all they tell us is that Ziyah didn't have a life-threatening condition as of October 4th, and they don't tell us that she was pregnant. They're just not relevant, except for the fact, I guess, that they don't tell us that she was pregnant, and she was there on September the 27th, according to her text messages. What we haven't heard in the last 3 to 4 days is anyone actually operated, and they tested them today. And we are, at this point, not contesting the bind over on those counts. That would explain why Mr. Butts would not want to be honest about why he was with Ziyah Harris. That would be enough to make somebody want to lie about their whereabouts or their connection to somebody. There's no evidence that it went any further than that from him. No evidence that he had been confronted by anybody about a sexual assault. No evidence that he was being threatened by Ziyah to expose him or get him in trouble if he didn't do something that she wanted him to do. By the time January 9th rolled around, they weren't really speaking that much. She was, in those text messages that we heard, getting frustrated with him for ignoring her. But never once did she say, well, if you don't talk to me, I'm going to tell everybody what we've been doing. And so there's a complete lack of any motive for him to respond in that way. And I would point the court to a case, it's called People v. Fisher. And it's 193 Mishap 284. It's a 1992 case. And I've got copies. Does the court want?
Yes.
And I point the court to this case because it's a case where homicide was charged and no body was found. A woman named Joyce, her husband was charged. He was convicted, and ultimately the appellate court reversed the conviction because the evidence was insufficient to submit the case to a jury. And so that was the error. And kind of the facts briefly are that Mr. and Mrs. Fisher were in the process of divorcing. It was a pretty contentious relationship. There had been lots of reports that he had been physically abusive to her. And she had even testified that he had threatened to kill her in mid-January of 1978, approximately 3 months before she disappeared. In April of 1978, apparently they were out together, they had lunch, and he was the last person to see her. After that, she disappeared. Now, there was no substantial testimony in that trial regarding her reliability, her long or short-term plans, children that just devote them, that she wouldn't have, essentially, that she wouldn't have had any reason to run away or leave. And so that gave rise to an inference that she was deceased. The prosecutor in that case offered no evidence of an act that resulted in Joyce Fisher's death necessary to establish corpus delicti. There has to be something more. There has to be, in this case, either an admission or confession, physical evidence, or some kind of witness testimony. In that case, there was no physical evidence, such as bloodstains or weapon, linking the defendant to Joyce's death. He did not admit that he killed her, although the prosecutor offered equivocal statements there, that he seemed to say, well, things didn't happen quite that way, and where it made it sound like maybe he did have something or some knowledge. The prosecutor there presented lots of evidence of defendant's motive and opportunity to kill her, but noted that those that the court says may not be based on evidence that is uncertain or speculative or merely uses a conjecture or possibility. The evidence denies the level of conjecture, and that's what we have here. We have conjecture. We have a lot of pieces of supposed evidence, but we have no connection. They don't connect to each other. They're puzzle pieces. When you put them together, there's no picture. There is no big picture because there is no act that can be testified to that Mr. Butt went and used it. There's no evidence that he had a knife and used it. In fact, the evidence that the prosecutor put forward disputes those theories.
Is it still possible for a woman to find love in her 40s and above? The 3 ways we level the playing field for women your age.
The idea that Mr. Butts was in some cover-up, the issue of his phone, I think was pretty well cleared up. He's never wanted her to look at who knows how many other women. And that she had tried pretty much everything she could think of to get in that phone well before any of these allegations came about, and that she's never been able to. And so it makes sense that he would not want her to get in that phone, especially if he assumed he was coming home and wanted to have contact with her while he was serving his sentence in the Wayne County Jail, that she not know that she was not the only female he was dealing with. We acknowledge that probable cause is a low standard, but it isn't just limited to whether the prosecution has presented significant or sufficient evidence on each element of the offense, which we submit they have not. They also must determine that there's a reasonable ground of suspicion supported by circumstances sufficiently strong to warrant a cautious person to believe the accused is guilty. That definition of probable cause, or that characterization, comes from People v. Carter, which is 250 Mishap 510. And so you have to have both elements of the crime met, and also those elements have to be met by evidence that is sufficiently strong to believe that it is relevant, that it actually proves what it is saying that it proves. And here we have conjecture, we have speculation, we have supposition, and we have somebody who he did have something to hide. But there's no evidence that he did anything about that. He didn't threaten her, he didn't ask her, or say if anybody finds out, that, I will go to jail, or you could go to jail, or you could be hurt. So, Your Honor, even by the relatively low standard of probable cause, we submit that there is insufficient evidence of both the idea that Mr. Butts did something to cause the death of Ziyah Garrett, and that he meditated. We don't know what happened when she left his shop on January the 9th around 9 o'clock. But I think it's safe to say we know she didn't go to his house where Angel Leonard was. Or Angel Leonard would probably be here in court and telling us what a weird interaction she had with him and why it was strange that he wouldn't come inside the house, or why he wouldn't let her out by the car where he was. We don't have any evidence that she went with him to the Park Rest Motel. We don't have any evidence that they were together beyond 8:30, 9 o'clock on January the 9th. And for to deny my note on premeditated murder.
I would start talking to Fisher that Ms. Quick is referenced. And it is important to note that this case is distinguishable for the following reasons. One, we're talking about a different standard. This was a trial issue, a directed verdict standard, where the court is saying at trial beyond a reasonable doubt. First of all and foremost, it's distinguishable for that. Secondly, though, the court in Fisher said in this case, there was no physical evidence such as bloodstains or a weapon linking defendant to Joyce's death. In this case, we have bloodstains. We have bloodstains on the hoodie that was found at 7 Mile and Bird, where the defendant spent 2 hours on the night of the 10th going into the 11th. That places them together in strong evidence that Ziyah Harris is in fact dead. Secondly, though, Judge, having dealt with People v. Fisher, Ms. Quick talked about the 9th and 10th, that no one saw the defendant with Ziyah for that day going into the 10th and into the 11th. However, we heard from one of his significant others or girlfriends that it was secret, that he didn't want anyone looking at his phone. And we certainly know that he knows how to keep different women and or girls away from each other. For example, I believe it was Shannon Harris that testified that she was familiar with an address of Outer Drive in Belfort, but she had no idea other than the fact that she would pick the defendant up there at different times. We know through other testimony that the defendant was dating someone that lived there. And with respect to Ms. Quick saying that Ziyah never threatened him, never did anything, I'm not sure if this one text message was highlighted by I see in this case when she testified, but on November 27th, 2023, at 23 minutes and 23 hours and 37 minutes UTC time, fuck you, tell you, regret not answering my calls, which I would submit to this court is a threat. And then just over a month later, she says she goes missing at the hands of the defendant. And Ms. Quick also talked about the driving around that Cordell and Jarvis were doing and how it was an unplanned meetup with Ziyah on the 9th. However, that may be true from Cordell's perspective, because he wouldn't have known what Jarvis's plan was at that time. But clearly, on the 9th, if you've seen the message, so I can delete your number, and then the defendant's response, okay. And Jarvis was the one driving per Cordell's testimony. Now, Ms. Quick also talked about the knives and how the knives found in the defendant's car of the one that was tested came back negative, and that's true. We cannot dispute that. However, we know that that was more than a month after giving the defendant plenty of time to clean it. But beyond that, this case is one where the defendant thought to, and successfully did, hide the body. And it's a common sense inference that if he thought to hide the body, he would also think to get rid of the murder weapon at the same time. And Judge, Ms. Quick is right. We are talking about a probable cause standard. And as I said, the question is, did the defendant with premeditation probably murder Ziyah Harris? And I submit to this court that the answer is yes. And circumstantial evidence, as is noted in the jury instructions at trial court or in circuit court, is just as good as direct evidence. And yes, this is a circumstantial case, but when we put those circumstances together, including the physical evidence, the cell phone evidence, which I would equate with physical evidence for purposes of that, it's very clear that the defendant, Jarvis Butts, took the life of Ziyah Harris to protect himself from the eventual discovery of his child that he was going to have with her, or at the very least thought he was going to have with her. I ask this court to bind over as charged with the addition or increase of criminal sexual conduct second degree. Thank you.
As far as Fisher, I agree with the people that this case is distinguishable. This is a case regarding a trial. And the one thing I had highlighted in pink was the quote, "In this case, there was no physical evidence such as bloodstains or a weapon leaking defendant to Joyce's death." In this case, we don't have the same facts or circumstances. I do agree this is a circumstantial case. Today is January 9th, 2025, exactly 1 year, from the day that Ziyah Harris disappeared. Before I get into the charges and the main charge on Ziyah Harris and the community who failed her. And I am only presented with certain evidence. I don't know the whole story. The attorneys know more than me, the family knows more than me, but from what I have heard over the last 4 days and 5 days total, is that several people failed her. I don't know where her mother is. I don't know anything other than that she was forced to live in a home where she was not protected or given the adequate attention and love. I don't know where her father is. I don't have any mention of him in her life, no presence. To Cordell, AKA King, and all the men who saw Jarvis Butts hanging out and always around these young girls, including Ziyah, and his 9-year-old daughter going up to the shop to clean up, who never showed up, or the person who was supposed to show up if that counselor was absent, after Ziyah was on the floor on the day she went missing, saying that she needed to speak to someone and speak to a counselor. There's no mention of CPS, but I wonder what their involvement was over the years, because this was not just a one-year thing. There are text messages at least from 2022. To her adoptive grandmother, Annette Harris, whose testimony, in my opinion, was very questionable. I understand why the people put her on the stand to establish Ziyah's residence and the houses on Bedford and the regular routine, to establish also that Ziyah was not a runaway child, that she was not a bad kid. I do believe she adopted Ziyah. I do believe that she had 6 kids in the house. I believe that Ziyah had on a dark hoodie the day she went missing, and that she had on red and black Nikes that day. What is hard to believe is that the defendant never came into the house as she testified. And there was also a minor that testified that he did as well. Text messages that show between him and Ziyah that he did in the basement, saying he was going to the shower, stealing her panties. He was always lurking around that house and asking for Janiyah and Zaniyah, from what I know. I even thought about the breakfast routine and saying that all the kids like eating breakfast at school. Did they have a choice? I don't know. But to always send those girls up there to clean up the shop raises questions. And how were there 2 women in that house who have birthed the children themselves who did not notice that Ziyah was pregnant? And I believe she was. But then after hearing text messages today, begging Jarvis for pads as if she didn't have anyone else to get them for her. And what stood out the most was when Annette Harris stood on the stand, and she learned around 6 p.m. that Ziyah did not come home from school, and said she looked around for her and decided to wait until the next morning to call the police. Without a tear, without emotion, or any expression of being devastated. And to her Aunt Shannon, question of being devastated from Ziyah going missing. She stated that she had friends help look for Ziyah, but was directed to just wait until the morning to call the police. A grown woman who likely suspected something strange going on didn't feel the need to call the police either. They were both able to go to sleep at night without hearing from Ziyah or having any indication that she was home at night. And of course, the defendant, who I will get to in a minute. I don't know who else failed Ziyah, but the community did. As far as the people establishing probable cause, I will focus on count 1, as it's been stated that there is, based off of the motion and the testimony I heard, that Ziyah was 12 and not 13 at the time that Jarvis Butts had sexual intercourse with her. The prosecution is correct. You do not have to have a body to establish first-degree premeditated murder. It would have been a much shorter exam had her body been found, but this is where we are. In the last 365 days, no text messages. We all heard today and yesterday that she was very active and frequently texted. No social media for a year. We heard through testimony that she was also active on social No phone calls, which she was also able to do according to one. She never came back to school. No one has seen her. Medical records dated from July 2014 to October 2023 indicated that she had no life-threatening medical issues that would lead to a natural cause of death. The black hoodie found in the area of 7 Muhlenberg with her DNA and blood on it. The holes in the hoodie consistent with some sort of struggle, violence, or weapon being used. And we know that there were no holes in that hoodie when she wore it to school. We saw a picture of her in a black hoodie on her last day that everyone saw her. I do believe her grandma testified truthfully about the sweatshirt that she had on, and that was practically new. And the border agent who said that no evidence of animals would have destroyed the clothing or the shoes to possibly lead to animals tearing up that hoodie. The clear glasses found in the blue Nissan the day after she went missing. The behavior of the defendant when he snatched those glasses. The witness. The shoes that her brother described as the same shoes that were found also in the area of 7 Muhlenberg near the hoodie. While this is still probable cause, the evidence all points to Jarvis Butts. His locations, him being seen with her last, the abortion searches, the abrupt silence between the two of them in text messages, and the constant lies he told throughout the entire investigation. And they were proven to be lies with text messages and other testimony. We may never know what happened, but from what I heard today and over the last 4 or 5 days, it appears he intended to perform what he thought was a do-it-yourself abortion on Ziyah and went south, and instead of seeking medical attention for her, he intentionally killed her and tried his best to cover it up. As much as I want her to be alive today, there is at least probable cause to show and believe that she's dead and that she was murdered by Jarvis Butts. Mr. Butts, stand up. You've been sitting over there for 4 days with your head down, hidden between and behind your attorneys with your mask on and taking vigorous notes. I want you to pay attention and listen to everything I have to say. 5 days, you. At one point, I thought you were cognitively impaired in the beginning of this exam. And then maybe you had the brain of a 10-year-old, and that's why you were doing such things. But as I heard more and more testimony, you're just a definition of watching you laugh and brag about all the women you have and making babies to groom them and having them in your presence and cleaning up, quote, cleaning up your shop. And the little girls around you has landed you here today. You groomed Ziyah. You played mind games with her. We all heard that. You controlled her emotionally. She was exposed to so much at such a young age. The text messages between you two were disgusting to hear. And to think that she had you saved in her phone as bae for life. Ziyah deserves so much more. And while I mentioned other people that failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster in this whole picture. She did deserve love from her parents and everyone who was in her life. She was ignored, she was neglected, and someone to love her, and she will never know what that feels like. Your children deserve more. As much as defense counsel has raised issues on count 1, all that has done is raise the question of fact for the trier fact, which means that this will be for a jury or a judge to hear at Third Circuit. I pray for the healing of all the victims and the young girls, and possibly we should look at this case as a prime example of how much work we have to do when it comes to protecting our children, and especially our black girls. I pray for closure and healing for all those who have been traumatized by you. And that justice be delivered. Your bind over date is January 16th at 9 o'clock a.m. Anything else for the record?
Okay, that's-
Do the right thing and tell us where she's at, please. I'm sorry, Judge. Just do it, Jarvis.
Where is she at, Jarvis?
Just tell us.
Oh, God, open your doors.
Judge, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to disrespect the court.
If you all could turn off the cameras, please.
You've been watching CBS News Detroit's continuing coverage of the preliminary examination of Jarvis Butts. He's the Detroit man charged in the murder of the missing 13-year-old girl, Ziyah Harris. And we now know that he will stand trial. I'm going to get you right to Jack's Springgate. He's live outside of 36th District Court with the latest. Jack, what can you tell us? I know some very chilling and disturbing during those days of testimony.
Well, yeah, a very emotional week in a case that's full of disturbing details, whether you have a connection to this case or not. And it does seem that Judge Aaliyah Sabri is bonding this case over to Third Circuit Court so that it can be tried in front of a jury. And like I said, it has been a very emotional week, especially today. It's now been exactly a year since Ziyah Harris was last seen. Now, the judge listened to the prosecution make their final arguments. The prosecution believes there is enough evidence through November's testimony of one of Butts' business partner, cell tower tracking data, testimony from someone who claims to have seen Butts and Ziyah together the evening she disappeared, and a number of Ziyah's belongings in case that investigators tracked Butts in the days following her disappearance. They say that Butts murdered Ziyah Harris. They say her clothes found near 7 Mile and Berg Road with blood and Butts' DNA, as well as her disappearance on social media as well, should be enough evidence to prove that she is dead and that Butts was the person behind it. Now, the defense argued that there's not enough of a connection between the alleged evidence to suggest that Butts intended to cause Ziyah's death. Ultimately, Judge Sabri found that there was enough evidence to let a jury decide whether or not that is the case. And we'll be getting some of that sound and that reasoning in our 5 o'clock hour so that you guys can hear a little bit about why the judge decided to send this case to be heard in
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this car. Okay, you ready? All right, $118.
And your Honor, would the record reflected when it says identified the defendant in this case?
So reflected. And just to be clear, you said I saw him walking in. You saw him when you were walking in or when he was walking in?
When I was walking in just now.
Thank you.
And Ms. Butts, where did you know Jarvis to work?
That called Frank's, and then he moved to a shop on Hopper and Counters. I don't know the name of it.
Okay. And Ms. Butts, do you remember talking to Detroit police back on February 26th, 2024?
Yes.
And what's the reason that you went and talked to Detroit police?
I saw Ziyah the day she went missing.
Okay. Tell me about that. What makes you believe that you saw Ziyah on the day she went missing?
Where do you want me to start? It's a lot.
So, from the very beginning, where is it that you think you saw Ziyah?
At the shop on Harbor and Counters.
Okay, and whose shop is that?
My brother Jarvis Butts and his partner.
Okay. What's the reason you were at your brother's shop that day?
Something was wrong with the car that I was driving, and I just needed him to check it out to make sure it was safe and drive.
Recall about what time did you go to Jarvis's shop? What time did you leave?
Somewhere between 6 and 6:30.
Okay. And what is it that you noticed while you were at the shop?
So it's a car, like garage. So I was sitting outside of the shop in my car because they were working on another car on the inside. As I sat there for the time that I was there, I kept seeing a little girl get in and out of his truck, going to the gas station and going back to his car.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you right there. Whose car are we talking about?
My brother.
Okay, and what kind of car was it?
I believe the Cadillac Escalade.
Okay. Do you remember what color?
Kind of like a pearl white, off white cream color.
Okay, and you said you described this as a like a 2 garage shop?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to approach with people's Exhibit 7.
Okay.
Now, Ms. Books, do you recognize what is it we're looking at in People's Exhibit 7?
Yes.
Okay, what is that?
That is the shop.
Okay.
Right in the middle.
And where at were you parked when you saw someone getting in and out of Jarvis's truck?
In front of the car doors of the garage right here. I was parked facing, I don't know what direction it is, but going towards garage. I was like in front, but outside.
Okay, so you were kind of parked parallel with the road?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you draw a T where your truck was?
My car?
Yeah, your car was.
Can I?
Yes. And then put an arrow the way you were facing. And where is it where that Jarvis's truck was? Just put a J where Jarvis's truck was. And what way was his truck facing?
It was facing my direction, so the front.
For that direction. Okay, thank you. Now, do you get a look at this little girl that you see getting in and out of his car?
I saw her, as she was walking. I never saw her face.
Did you see any clothing?
I did. I just remember her having on a colorful jacket.
Okay. And what door, which side do you remember seeing her getting in and out of Jarvis's truck? Or did it change?
I don't really remember.
Okay, that's okay. So you said you mostly remember. Now, I'm going to show you what's marked as People's Exhibit 2, which is already admitted, and People's Proposed Exhibit 10. You want my approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Handing you what's marked as People's Exhibits 2 and 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
What is it that you recognize?
Right. Here, this jacket.
And for the record, you're pointing up in channel 1, and that's in People's Exhibit 10. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of People's Proposed Exhibit 10 as Exhibit 10. Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the jacket that you saw that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, move for the proposed People's Exhibit 10.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay.
Where is the what you recognize People's Exhibit 2?
looks like channel 2 here maybe.
Okay, facing the back?
Yeah.
Okay. And you recognize the jacket in this photo too, right? Yes.
It's a little blurry, but it looks the same.
Okay.
to me.
And what about in channel 1 of exhibit 2?
It would be this one right here.
Okay, and it's fair to say that's the back of a jacket? It seems to be the back of a jacket? Okay, thank you. And you said that you saw this little girl with this jacket on getting in and out and going into the gas station?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know who this little girl was at the time?
No.
Okay. Is there a time that you ever get out of your car?
Yes.
And what do you do?
I needed to use the restroom, so I asked his partner if I could use the restroom. He told me to go and walking towards the gas station. She was walking in front of me, going into the gas station.
Okay. So, about how far in front of you was she?
I would say maybe where the gentleman in the gray blazer is behind you. Maybe a little bit further, I'm not really sure about that distance.
From where you are to him?
Yeah.
Okay. And boy, I'm really bad at estimates.
20, 25 feet?
Yeah, I would agree with about 20 to 25 feet. And you said you never got a chance to see the girl's face.
No.
Was anything else that occurred that you can remember?
I just remember her being kind of small. I was walking towards her. I was like, she's tiny, and I just remembered the coat.
Okay. Tiny, like in what way? Like tiny, skinny, short?
Kind of skinny and short.
Okay. And did you ever ask Jarvis who the little girl was?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
He told me, and I can't remember if it was this exact word, or he said it's my partner's niece, or he said it was King's niece.
Okay, but you knew who he was referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Did you think anything of it at the time?
No.
And what is it that made you think something? Was there a time where you thought something different?
She told me about some things that happened on Valentine's Day, and then she sent me a video of a podcast about my brother.
Okay. And what did you do as a result of receiving those things?
I called Shannon and I asked her for Sergeant Jones' phone number.
Okay. And who's the Shannon that you called?
His kid's mom.
Shannon Harris?
Yes.
Okay. Do you do anything before you go and talk to Sergeant Jones?
Yes.
Okay. What is it that you do?
Okay, so after having a conversation with Shannon Harris, and his informed that his partner King, I guess something happened where the
Objection, this is hearsay.
There's not a statement yet, Judge.
Being informed.
I'm not sure what she's even about to say.
Okay, just to the extent that it's informed of someone else's statement.
You might have to object in a couple moments.
You need to speak up.
If you could stand up
Please.
and make your objection.
Yes, just objecting to the fact that she was informed of something. It appears this might be hearsay, but we'll see. Yeah.
Could you finish what you were saying? I don't know where you're going with this.
I'm trying to remember where I left. Okay, so after talking to Shannon Harris and his other kid's mom. I was informed of some things that had taken place, I think Valentine's Day, so they told me that his partner King.
Okay, so
that
at this
his-
point, this is hearsay.
Yeah.
1 second. What is an objection?
I'm sorry.
The witness has to stop talking.
So based on those, do you go and talk to someone else?
Yes.
Okay. Who do you go and talk to?
His partner King
Okay. And where is it that you go and talk to King at?
at the shop on Harper and Connors.
Okay. And without telling me what King said, kind of describe what was your conversation about?
Well, I went to see what happened and what was going on. During that time, I told him that I had never seen any little girl at my brother's shop besides my nieces, outside of the little girl that I saw getting out of his truck that day.
Okay.
And you took.
And who is King again?
His business partner.
Okay. And do you know his government name?
I believe it's Cordero or something like that. I just always call him King.
Okay. So you went and told him that you hadn't seen anyone out at the shop besides your nieces and then the one little girl you saw that one day.
Yes.
Okay. Did you ask him about that little girl?
Well, I didn't ask him about it. After I said that to him, he told me.
Objection, Your Honor, this is going to be hearsay again.
Judge, it's going to go to the effect on the listener.
There could be an exception. I don't know what she's saying. So you might as well just stay standing up. Go ahead, say what you're going to say.
After I mentioned to him that I had only saw my nieces and one particular little girl, he then told me that that was Ziyah that I saw that day and I was there.
So I would object then, given now that she has testified to that it is hearsay, that it is being introduced for the truth.
And Judge, I would say that it's actually a statement of identification.
So this is not an identification that she personally made, she's just being told.
I mean, she saw Ziyah that day, so it's.
She didn't know who it was. I mean, she had no idea who this was. That's
She
not
didn't know
her
who she was.
identification.
So it is hearsay.
Okay. So, without saying what King said, were you informed of anything about a little girl that you saw on January 9th, 2024?
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, Jarvis had told you that that was King's niece?
Yes.
Okay. And when you talked to King, did you have reason to not believe what Jarvis told you?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know your nieces from Jarvis? That is a poorly worded question. I am sorry. If that was your niece, would you have recognized her that day?
Yes.
Okay. And you did not recognize this little girl as your niece, did you?
No.
Okay. What is it that you did after speaking with King that day?
I called Shannon Harris and I asked her for Sergeant Jones' phone number.
Okay. And did you eventually talk to Sergeant Jones?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. What day was it that you went to the shop and saw the little girl?
Can I ask you a question? I didn't remember the exact day at that time.
Okay. What is it that makes you believe that it was Ziyah Harris that you saw on that day?
I'm not quite sure how to answer what you're asking me. Like,
That may be a poorly worded question. I'm sorry. Can I just have 1 second, Judge?
Yes.
Ms. Butts, did you come to learn of the day that you had gone to Jarvis's shop by going through the locations on your phone?
yes,
Okay. And that's the date that you don't remember off the top of your head right now, but it is revealed in your phone locations?
yes.
Okay. Let's see here. One second, Judge. Different finder. When is it that you went through your phone locations to determine the date? I'm sorry, do you need a moment?
I believe it's February, I think like 24th or the 26th. I can't remember the exact date.
Okay, that's when you would have went through your phone to find those?
Yes.
Okay, and did you also go through that in your interview with Sergeant Jones?
Yes.
Okay. And did you give Sergeant Jones permission to look at your location data?
Yes.
Okay. And your phone kind of extraction in general? Like to go through your phone for the data?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing else, Judge.
Thanks, Chris. Actually, so you go to the shop where your brother works periodically, right?
From time to time, yes.
You've been there prior to the day we've been talking about today?
Yes.
A couple times at least?
Yes.
And you'd been back there after?
Yes.
But the day we've been talking about, that's the only time you ever saw a child there?
That was the only time I saw a child I didn't recognize.
Okay, so you had seen other children there before?
Yes.
Okay, when you say that you recognize, these are who exactly?
My
usually?
nieces.
And when you first arrived at the shop that day, Jarvis told you that he wasn't going to be able to work on your car?
No.
No? Did you ask him if he'd be able to?
Judge, I think this calls for hearsay. They can't admit statements of the defendant.
I'm looking more so from her own statement, actually.
From her
We'll
what?
start with her own statement.
Okay.
Did you ask him right away if he would be able to work on your car
I talked to him prior to coming to the shop.
before you arrived? You asked if he could work on your car that day?
I asked him to look at my car that day.
Okay. Did you arrive at the shop with the understanding that he would or would not be able to?
I arrived at the shop knowing that he was going to look at my car.
Okay. One moment. And was that via text or call? Or some other way?
Probably video call.
Okay, so a video call a little bit before you headed over?
Earlier in the day, maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what time.
Okay, so that's how you decided that you'd go over later?
He told me I could come.
Judge, this is kind of all calling for hearsay in a backdoor way.
The response is hearsay. Not that
Yes.
you necessarily asked for it, but it is hearsay.
Sure, we can keep it
Administrative.
just her own. So to be clear, we don't need to talk about what he said to you, but you did a video call to him. And in that call, you asked if he could work on your car.
You
Right.
keep saying work on my car. I said look at my car.
Okay, look at your car, but you asked him personally in a video call.
Yes.
Okay, and that was maybe that morning?
I don't remember what time of day it was, but it was before I went to him.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and as you were saying, this day, I think you said you saw some other children there at other times, but this particular child, you only ever saw this child on this particular day?
Yes.
And the whole time you were there, from your testimony and from that police interview, you said that you never saw her face?
Yes.
And then you did also see some news stories about this case?
Yes.
Yeah, in the podcast that you talked about. Right, there were some podcasts.
I had already saw her on the news, but I did not know who she was.
Sure, but that was, by seeing those stories, that's how you started to think.
Well, I was sent the podcast after some other things that was told to me. That's when I received the podcast.
So initially, between the day you were at the shop, right, and then until you started to see that news, at first you didn't make this connection that maybe she was anyone in particular.
Not at all.
Okay. And then through seeing that news, those podcasts, that's when you started to think she
No,
was.
that's not the reason why I thought that.
No, but that's the timing, or it's not?
I guess you could say that.
That's when you started to, at least when you saw those things, that's when you started to wonder.
I was wondering before I saw the podcast.
Okay, in your police interview that you did, did you tell them that at first when you saw the news, you didn't really make a connection because of not having seen her face?
Yes.
Okay. So that interview was on February 26, 2024, right?
Yes.
And you were having some trouble remembering some of the specific details from January 9th at that point?
Not so much as remembering maybe the order I remembered it in.
Okay, were there some times at least though when you were asked some questions and some details that you had to say, I can't remember some things?
I can't remember now.
Okay. And would you agree that at least
Like,
that it
it's been a minute.
okay.
I
was just saying-
probably did. I guess it would be safe to say because I didn't know.
Okay, so you think it's safe to say that at that point in time, there are at least some details you were having a hard time, some questions you couldn't answer?
I can't disagree.
Okay. And it was pretty close in time, shortly before that police interview, that was when you first started to think that maybe this girl you'd seen at the shop had been Ziyah Harris.
Can you repeat that?
So the first time you started to think that maybe that child, the one you saw, maybe that was Ziyah Harris.
Maybe about a week or so before.
Okay. I believe, does it sound right to you that I think you told the police that it was on the Thursday prior to the interview?
Whatever the Thursday was after Valentine's Day.
Okay. So probably February 22nd. That was the Thursday prior to your interview.
Okay.
And then when you were at the shop, you primarily saw this child while she was inside a truck, right?
I didn't know it was a child in the truck until she kept getting out.
Okay, but when you saw her, she was in a truck?
I saw her getting out the truck, yes.
And were you inside your vehicle?
Yes.
You arrived in the daylight, right?
Yes.
And that's, I think, what you're referring to, right? Initially, that's when you didn't yet know somebody was in the truck.
Can you say that again?
So at the beginning, when you first got there, right, you didn't know right away that somebody was in the truck?
No, I didn't.
I think you had said before, because it was so light outside, it was a bit difficult to see into the truck?
I wasn't really paying attention to his truck. He was outside of it.
Sure. And then in your police interview, you referred to then seeing a light in the truck, and that's when you started to see somebody?
Yeah, that's when the door opened.
Okay, so there's a light turned on, and at the same time a door opened?
That's the reason the light was on.
Okay, because the truck door was open. Yes?
Sure.
And you said that you saw a couple different times her go back and forth to the gas station?
Yes.
And only one of those different times you were on your way to the gas station as well?
Yes.
But for that whole time, she remained in front of you?
When I was going into the gas station, she was in front of me. When I walked into the gas station, she went to the left, I went straight, and over to the right.
For that walk over to the gas station, was it getting dark at that point?
It was already dark.
Okay. And while she was in the truck, you were not sure exactly which part of the truck this was?
I can't remember, no.
Okay. So you understood initially that when you arrived, you'd probably have to wait at the shop sometime?
Yes.
I think you referred to just one other car he worked on first. Is that all there was before you?
It was actually another vehicle out there, but I don't pay my brother to work on my car, so I had to wait until he was done making his money.
Sure.
So I waited.
Sure. So do you know how many cars he worked on before he got to you?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you know if there were any other customers present in person?
I did see someone, I can't remember what kind of car they was in, but it was, I believe, a gentleman that needed to pull into the garage because Jarvis asked me to move my car out the way because I was blocking the garage, so yes.
Was this someone you recognized at all?
No.
So in total, other than Jarvis, or who you referred to as King, was there anyone present that you recognized that day?
No. Just King and my brother.
So as you said, the sun set while you were there. Do you know about how long it was light out before it got dark?
Well, I got there about 4 o'clock. It didn't take long for it to get dark. I don't remember the exact time, but it got dark pretty fast.
Okay, and then other than when you went to the gas station, were you always at the shop?
What do you mean?
So did you go anywhere else?
No, I never left. All I did was move my car when he asked me to move my car. And once the driveway was clear, I back where I was. I didn't go anywhere else.
Okay. And when you were present, not going to the gas station, were you always inside your vehicle?
Yes,
Were your doors open or closed?
closed.
Okay, and were your windows up or down?
They were up unless I asked him something.
Okay, so sometimes if you needed to communicate, you just open the window?
Or I would call him, yeah. Yes.
And you were saying today that at one point you did speak to Jarvis about who this girl was.
Yes.
And when you were talking to the police about this, you had said that you weren't sure exactly what his response was.
What I said was I wasn't sure of the wording.
Sure, that's what I mean. That
Okay.
You told the police, right, that it might have been King's niece, or maybe he said it's my homeboy's niece?
He said it was his partner or King's niece, but he definitely said it was someone else's niece.
Okay, I think, does it sound right to you that you used the term homeboy's niece with the police?
I probably did.
Okay.
It's all the same to me.
And then that's what you continued to think at first, right? At first you just believed that it was someone else's niece.
Yeah,
Specifically, you thought it was probably King's niece.
that's what I was told.
Which I think, as we established, right, King is the same person as Cordell, right?
Yes.
And then after that, you would listen to some of these podcasts and to the news.
I listened to his kid's mother, and then I watched the podcast.
Okay, so those are some things that happened, both.
Yes.
And then once you started to have this different information you were gathering, then you kind of started to look into it for yourself.
Yes.
Do some of your own investigation.
Yes.
And then at one point following that, that's when you decided to go back to the shop
Yes.
to speak to Cordell
Yes.
and to discuss some of these things you've been learning with him.
Yes.
You and Jarvis are not particularly close.
I wouldn't say that we're really distant. I don't see him every day. I don't talk to him every day, but he's my brother.
Okay. He's your brother, but you don't have a very close relationship, or?
He's my brother.
Okay. What about with his children? Are you close with his children?
Some of the ones that I know.
So he has 13 kids, right?
I have no idea.
Do you have an idea of around how many kids he has?
A lot.
Okay. Do some of them live with different mothers?
Yes.
And you don't spend time with all of them?
No.
So which ones do you know?
I don't want to say their names. They're minors.
Okay.
And I don't want to disclose their identity.
Could you just give like a number instead? How many do you know?
I'm counting. About 8.
So when you say 8 that you know, does that mean 8 that you have like personal contact with?
I have.
Okay. When is the last time that you've seen any of them?
Maybe 2 months ago.
Were you and Jarvis raised by your grandmother?
For the most part.
And were there some events surrounding her death that related to your relationship with Jarvis that impacted some things?
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, Judge. Ms. Butts, you said that there was there was another reason, there was a different reason that you thought that it was Ziyah that you had saw that day. When you were starting to compile, or when you talked to Shannon Harris, and then you got the podcast. Before that, you said there was other reasons why you had thought that was Ziyah.
So, am I?
Yes.
can I
What?
speak for-
What is
okay,
that? Yes.
So, at the time, I didn't know. Once I realized that it was a possibility that I saw her, there were several reasons that led me to believe that it was a possibility I was there. And I didn't want to get into detail as far as what I knew before the podcast. But if you would like, I would explain to you why I thought these things.
Your Honor,
It's up to you.
can we approach? Yes. We'll be right back. Go in the hallway. Tomorrow. They come back. You need some water or something? Can you get some water from there? Can you give her some water? Oh, yeah. Please. Calm down. Calm down. It's gonna be alright. Huh? Take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, we are back on the record. Ms. Butts, you are still under oath. Ms. Swift, you go right ahead.
Thank you. So, Ms. Butts, what's the sources of these reasons that you have? Are these things that you know from your personal knowledge? Are these things that you observe yourself?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Repeat that.
So these reasons that you were thinking of, what are the sources of them? Is it somebody told you something? Is it something that you saw yourself, you observed, or a coupling of that?
I would say a bit of both.
Okay.
Things that I was told and things that I heard.
Okay. Were there heard from Jarvis?
No.
Okay. Were these things that you had already known prior
to
thinking that was Messiah that you saw?
I'm sorry, I'm confused on the question.
So are these things, the sources that you have for these reasons, are they like things that you have personal knowledge of, or are they things that somebody told you about?
These were things that I was told. I'm trying to understand the question that you're asking me.
Ms. Ripley, you're referring to the question before we went into a sidebar about her leading up to believing that it was possibly Ziyah Harris at the shop, correct?
Yes.
Does that help clarify
Okay.
the line of questioning?
Yes.
Okay, so those reasons, those things, are those things that you had known before? Are they based on your observations, or?
Well, these were things that I was told. And after asking the questions that I needed to ask, I came up with the conclusion that it was a possibility that Ziyah was the little girl that I saw that day.
Okay, thank you. You said that when you were parked at Jarvis's shop, that it was getting dark out.
Yes.
Okay. That darkness, is that maybe the reason why the color on the jacket stood out?
Well, the jacket didn't stand out until I was walking into the gas station behind her, because I wasn't really paying attention to what she had on. I just kept seeing her get in and out of the truck, going in the gas station and coming back to the truck, and that's what caught my attention.
Okay, so the movement is what attracted you to it at first?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing for the judge. Nothing further.
Okay, Ms. Bussey, you're done testifying.
Discover your style. Instantly elevate your wardrobe. Get clothes and accessories delivered to your doorstep. Save money on high-quality brands. Subscribe to Threadbeast now and get $100 in bonus items as a welcome gift. Use code BONUS100.
Picture behind me is of Ziyah, and that will always be haunting. because it was taken just a short time before the evidence shows it was taken by Ziyah herself, a selfie. That's the last known picture that we know about of her. And it was a point of smiling and waving and saying hello. But little did she know that she...
This story is so incredibly tragic, knowing those teenage years, you know? Should be having fun, doing all of those things, but she's not. And she's missing, but presumed to be dead and murdered. I want you to take a listen to Kim Worthy. That was the prosecutor from Wayne County. Here she is talking about the evidence against the man that they have accused of the murder. And there's a connection between this man and Ziyah's family, and a lot of the facts here are...
The evidence shows overwhelming. She was seen alive was January the 9th of this year, 2000, reported to the Detroit Public School Police Department by her grandmother on that very day when she never returned home from school. And again, that was January the 9th, 2024. In early February of 2024, the case was turned over to the Detroit Police Department. Frankly, that should have happened right away. But they began investigating immediately. That we know and that we have, Ziyah and this defendant were going to meet after school on January the 9th. We know that she did indeed meet up with the defendant that we're charging in this case. We also know that several people close to Mr. Butts, who we were charging later, saw them together in several different locations, people that he knew well. We have evidence that at to a motel and that Ziyah was never seen or heard from again. Not from her family, not from her schoolmates, not from her friends, not from social media where she was extremely active with her friends, not from teachers, no one. Threatening medical emergency to her. And he, again, was the last person that saw her alive. She would have turned 14 years old just 10 days ago on September the 16th of 2024. And again, no one has seen or heard from her. You look at that face and you do not see the horrors that she had gone through in her short life. The exploitation, the molestations, the sexual abuse, and the pregnancy that she was concealing. The evidence will show that from one of her text messages to and with Jarvis Butts. And we also know, the evidence will show, that there's no evidence of anyone else being the father of that child other than the defendant himself, who we charge today. And he knew she was pregnant. We know that he was also searching for ways to abort the baby. We know that sexually explicit photos were requested by him of her and that she complied and sent them to her. All at the hands, we allege, the man we are charging with her death and also her long-term sexual abuse. Today, we are charging Jarvis Butts with 1 count of first-degree premeditated murder, 1 count of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree, and 1 count of child sexually abusive material. Today, we are also charging Mr. Butts with more counts of criminal sexual conduct on 2 more girls, yes, girls, on 2 other separate cases. The girls in question now are 20 and 11 respectively today, but both were under the age of 13 years old at the time the offenses occurred that we're charging. Based on all the evidence that I've laid out now and much more that will be shown later in court, based on all these cases we will present in court, Mr. Butts targeted and befriended women who had to have sexual relationships with their young daughters. He would have relationships with their mothers, but his true desire was to have sex with their young daughters. That's what the evidence will show. It's a classic and expert groomer and pedophile.
Sounds so familiar. A lot of parallels with this case and what happened to Madeline Soto down in Florida. And it's these predators. They know how to do it. They know how to get close to children. And that's apparently what happened here. I want to bring in a special guest with us tonight. Joining us from Detroit, Michigan, Ziyah Harris's cousin, Roxy. Roxy, thank you so much for joining us.
Are you drowning in payday loan debt? Have you taken up multiple payday loans and are unable to pay them back? Then listen to this message closely. A recently announced payday loan forgiveness program is allowing Americans with payday loan debts to be forgiven by as much as 80% of the balance owed. This program is only available for a limited period of time. We strongly advise you to call in now to see if you qualify for this limited time offer. If you fall behind,
State your name for the record, ma'am.
Valerie.
And Ms. At that time, in what area did you live?
That's where I live.
Evergreen and St. Martin's?
Yes.
Okay, is that in the city of Detroit, Wayne County?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on March 7th, 2024, did you come into contact with the police?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the reason you came into contact with the Detroit Police Department?
I found a young lady's ID.
And where did you find that ID?
Directly across the street from my house.
And was it like a driver's license, school ID, or something else?
School ID, it looked like.
And first time you had seen it there?
No, I stepped over it for 2.5 weeks.
After 2.5 weeks of noticing it there, that you decided to pick
I
it
just
up?
decided whomever it belongs to.
Okay, and when you picked it up, did you read the name on that ID?
Yes.
And what was the name on the ID?
Ziyah Harris.
And did that raise any concerns in your mind?
It sure did.
And what's the reason it raised concerns?
I just heard it on the news before it came out.
You heard her name?
Her name, yes.
Okay. And when you picked it up, did you have gloves on or anything like that?
No. No.
And you used your bare hand then?
I took my thumb out of it.
And what was the reason you just put your hands on the
I
outside?
didn't want any disturb any of the prints that were on there.
And when you picked it up, did you place it in anything?
Once I got to the next stop, I was on the bus line, I took it in the gas station and I put it in a lid.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. You picked it up and then got onto the bus?
Yeah, but I still had it like this.
And
I never put my fingerprints, any more prints on it.
And for the record, the witness indicated by holding her hands about.
Yes.
The gas station, did you go into the gas station?
Yes.
And did you tell the people in the gas station about what you found?
Yes, sir. I also told the bus driver what I had found.
And then after you told the gas station people, what happened next?
I asked them to call police for me.
And did they?
Yes.
And then did the police come to your location?
Yes.
And after the police got there, what happened next?
They took me back to my house. So yes.
And did
pulled up. Yes.
I'm approaching with People's Proposed Exhibit 40. Ms. Smith, do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And is that the ID that you found?
Yes, sir.
I move to admit People's Proposed 40.
No objection. It'll be a minute.
And permission to publish on the screen.
Yes.
And Ms. Smith, I don't know if you can see the screen from where you are. That's the picture I just showed you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is that the cup or the top of the
That's the lid I said.
lid that you
Yes,
put
sir.
it in? Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
And on the bottom left, it says grade 8, correct?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Just briefly.
Have you been suffering from the after effects of a work injury? The good news is you're still entitled to a 5 or 6 figure.
Good afternoon, Ms. Smith.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Was it March the 6th? Or I'm sorry, the 7th? Yes.
Yes. And you said you had been stepping over it for approximately 2 weeks?
2.5 weeks I stepped over.
Okay, so that puts you in. So does that mean that it was actually on the sidewalk?
No, it was in the grass.
In the grass? The grass next to the street?
Yes.
So there's like an, usually kind of like an easement between like the street and the sidewalk?
Yes.
And there's like a patch of grass there?
Yes.
And is that right in front of the bus stop or?
No, it was a little.
Landmark, would you say?
Nothing else is there.
Nothing else there?
No.
How far to the corner of the block?
St. Martin. Steps, yes. A few steps.
Perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Can we redirect?
Yes, briefly. Ms. Smith, just a couple of questions for you. Ms. Quick asked you a couple of questions about specifically where you found it. You said it was in a patch of grass next to the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you had been stepping over it for about 2.5 weeks before you gave it to the police department?
Before I decided to pick it up, yes, sir.
The 2.5 weeks that you've been stepping over it at the beginning of that, is that the first time you noticed it?
Yes, sir.
And it could have been there before those 2.5 weeks, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, I think that causes speculation.
I don't think it's a yes or no question, Judge. I don't think that
How
calls
does
for
she know
speculation.
how long it's been there? She can only
Can you
testify.
stand up to the court reporter, please?
Yes, Your Honor. My objection is how can she testify to how long it could have been there prior? She can only testify to what she knows, and she testified that she knows it's been there for 2.5 weeks.
Did you see it being placed there on the grass?
I'm sorry?
Did you see it being
No,
placed on
ma'am.
the grass? Okay.
No, ma'am.
So I'm going to sustain the objection because she didn't know, but she didn't see it dropped.
Okay. So the first time you noticed it was 2.5 weeks prior to March 7th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you talked to the police officers, did you look at a photo, a Google Street View of your location?
Yes, sir.
And did you indicate on that photo where you found it?
Exactly, yes. They took me, excuse me, they took me back to my house so I could show them exactly where I found it.
May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
I'm approaching with what's going to be marked as People's Proposed 62. Do you recognize that, ma'am?
Yes.
And is that the photo that you signed and indicated where you found it?
Yes, sir.
At this time, I would move to admit People's Proposed 62.
No objection. Will it be admitted?
And permission to publish, since I don't have a hard copy right now.
Yes.
And on the
What if weight loss didn't have to feel like a fight every single day?